The hook and the great question. Imagine this. You've reached the summit. The world applauds. The degrees hang like trophies on your wall. The numbers in your bank account have broken past thresholds that once seemed unthinkable. Your LinkedIn glows like a monument to ambition fulfilled. You're seen, admired, respected, even feared. You are, by every external measure, a success. And yet, one quiet evening, after a toast to another promotion and a flattering article about your rise to the top, you return home, close the door behind you, and something collapses. Not physically. There are no tears, no drama, no visible sign of unraveling, but a strange hollowness yawns open inside. You stare at the ceiling in a room filled with designer furniture and curated art, and the silence asks a question your achievements cannot answer. Who are you when no one is watching? This is not burnout. This is not imposter syndrome. This is not just a bad day. This is something deeper, more ancient, more primal. It's the quiet ache beneath the noise of success. A yearning that no accolade can silence. A sense that, somewhere along the way, while collecting the outer symbols of power, you lost touch with something more essential. Now, imagine this paradox. A woman standing at the height of worldly accomplishment feels more fragile than she did at the beginning. She's done everything right, played every card well, leaned in, powered through. She was told that empowerment came from breaking barriers, from leading teams, from achieving visibility in arenas once denied her. She has done all that, and yet she cannot shake the growing suspicion that what she really craves is not more success, but something far more elusive, something invisible, something unquantifiable. Strength. But not the kind that gets written into resumes or echoed in press releases. Not the kind that wears stilettos like armor and answers emails at 2 a.m. The kind of strength that no one applauds because it cannot be seen. The kind that doesn't need validation, attention, or applause. The kind of strength that whispers, "I know who I am," even when the world screams otherwise.
And this begs the question, why would a woman, praised for her power, secretly crave something that makes her invisible? Here lies the contradiction at the heart of modern womanhood. Society urges her to chase visibility, dominance, excellence, to rise, to outperform, to conquer. And yet, behind closed doors, many women report a yearning for inner silence, sovereignty, and solitude, a groundedness untouched by applause or criticism. A return not to softness, but to stillness, not to submission, but to inner command. Could it be that we've mistaken empowerment for performance? And if so, what is it costing us? Why is it that after achieving so much, so many women feel like they're standing on shifting sand? Why do confidence seminars and leadership books feel more like masks than medicine? Why does the word empowerment itself begin to ring hollow, like a slogan more than a truth? Here's a darker thought. What if the very pursuit of success has become a new form of captivity? We no longer burn witches, but we crown queens and watch them burn out. We no longer bind feet, but we bind time, identity, and worth to a relentless performance of competence. The pressure to be strong, smart, capable, and flawless is its own kind of cage, one gilded with opportunity, but a cage nonetheless. And maybe, just maybe, that's why so many women crave something deeper than power. They crave the strength to say no, the strength to walk away, the strength to be misunderstood and remain unmoved, the strength to live with integrity when no one is watching, the strength to face the abyss and not flinch. Not a curated image, not a measurable milestone, but the raw, feral strength of knowing oneself beyond any role. But where does this craving come from? Is it ancient? Is it modern? Is it the echo of something women once had and lost, or something they've always known and been told to forget? And what happens when a woman no longer wants to be seen, but instead wants to be whole? The questions multiply, the tension deepens, the cracks in the mirror of modern success begin to show. And through those cracks, something begins to whisper, not weakness, not retreat, but the sound of a truth long buried under layers of expectation. We stand then on the edge of a deeper revelation, one that demands we look beyond the metrics and into the myths that have shaped us. And now we must ask, what hidden forces shaped this craving? Where did we learn that outer success should be the pinnacle? And what ancient part of us is quietly rejecting that story? Let's go deeper. The hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical origins. There is a war raging beneath the skin, and it's not just personal, it's archetypal. It begins long before any woman sends her first resume, before she posts her first filtered photo, before she even understands the weight of her own body in the world. From the moment she is born, she enters a psychic battlefield, one that isn't fought with guns, but with myths, expectations, stories so old they no longer sound like stories, but reality itself. This hidden war is the origin of the craving, not for success, for sovereignty. But to understand why that craving pulses beneath even the most celebrated lives, we must go deeper, into the architecture of identity, the invisible scaffolding of culture, and the myths that shape womanhood from the inside out. The myth of the achieving self. Carl Jung once said that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. But what if the child is also bearing the unlived lives of centuries of women, forced to shrink, silence, or surrender? Modern culture believes it has freed the feminine spirit by inviting her into the world of achievement. But what if this invitation is itself a disguise? What if the modern obsession with external success is simply the pendulum swinging to the other extreme? Women once existed solely in the private domain, caretakers, muses, wombs. Now they have stormed into the public realm, breaking ceilings and shattering molds, and rightly so. But the danger lies not in success itself, but in believing it completes the soul. What if both roles, the housebound angel and the boardroom warrior, are masks over something deeper? Nietzsche spoke of the will to power, the driving force within all beings to assert and expand themselves. But Nietzsche also warned of a subtler, more dangerous force, the herd morality, the internalization of the crowd's values until one forgets their own. When a woman seeks success because she believes it makes her more worthy, more lovable, more seen, she is not exercising her will to power, she is surrendering it. Her achievements are now dictated by invisible scripts. This is the hidden mechanism, identity as performance. Jean-Paul Sartre called it bad faith, when we lie to ourselves to escape the weight of freedom. We play roles, adopt expectations, and conform to images of who we think we should be, rather than confront the terrifying truth that we are free, and with that freedom comes responsibility. Success becomes a stage, and we become actors. The applause feels like affirmation, but it is actually a drug, keeping us from the terrifying task of becoming real. The psyche splits. At a psychological level, the tension is unbearable. A woman knows at some deep unconscious layer that she was not born for applause, but for authenticity, not for conformity, but for inner coherence, not for success, but for wholeness. Yet everywhere she turns, the world demands performance. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, wrote that the will, the primal force driving all existence, is ultimately irrational and unsatisfiable. We pursue desires, achieve them, and then find ourselves disillusioned. The craving for inner strength arises precisely at the moment when this truth becomes unbearable. She begins to suspect that every milestone she chases is a mirage. And the more she tries to fill the void with achievement, the deeper the void becomes. It's not because she's broken, it's because she's waking up. Waking up to the fact that the world never wanted her whole, only useful. Waking up to the truth that success in a broken paradigm is just another kind of servitude.
Beneath it all lies an older, deeper wound. For millennia, feminine power was feared. It bled, it birthed, it intuited. It danced with the irrational, the mystical, the cyclical. It could not be tamed, and so it was demonized. The modern world worships the linear, growth, goals, upward trajectories. But the feminine essence moves in spirals, in deaths and rebirths, in inner knowing that defies logic. When a woman is taught to suppress this intuitive core in favor of outer conquest, she is not just misled, she is betrayed. The betrayal is systemic, cultural, but worst of all, it becomes internalized. The woman begins to betray herself, to mistrust her softness, to ignore her intuition, to ridicule her own longing for stillness, solitude, and inner strength. Thus begins the split. On one side, the high-achieving self, polished, productive, praised. On the other, the ancient self, quiet, shadowed, craving meaning over metrics. And the more she invests in one, the more the other starves. Until something cracks. And through that crack, the questions begin to pour in. What if I no longer want to be admired? What if my ambition is no longer about winning, but about healing? What if my greatest strength is not how loud I roar, but how deeply I know myself? This is the existential tension that modern life conceals behind motivational posters and performance reviews. The deep truth that so many women carry silently. I want to be more than what I do. But to reclaim that truth, she must first uncover the lie. And the lie is this, that outer success equals inner strength. It does not. They are not opposites, but they are not twins. Inner strength is forged in fire, not of the marketplace, but of the soul. It is born when a woman stops trying to prove her worth and starts remembering it. When she turns inward, not out of defeat, but out of defiance. It is an act of rebellion, of return, of remembering something sacred. But what happens if she doesn't? What if she keeps climbing? What if she continues to achieve, perform, and impress, while her soul quietly starves? The consequences are invisible but catastrophic, and they are all around us. We must look closer. The unseen consequences. You wouldn't notice it at first. Not in her accolades, not in her Instagram feed or her LinkedIn endorsements, not even in her TED Talk, where she speaks confidently about balance and purpose. But if you watched her closely, if you stood in the silence between her victories, you might see it. The hollowing, the slow erosion, the haunting echo of a woman who has become the ghost of her own ambition. She smiles, yes, but the smile has edges. She succeeds, yes, but the success tastes like ash. She wakes every morning with her to-do list clenched like a shield, her inbox a battleground she's too tired to fight. And yet, everyone around her calls her powerful. This is the cruel irony, that society praises her while she is quietly vanishing from herself. That what we celebrate in the outer world may be a direct reflection of what is crumbling in the inner one. But why does this happen? Why does the pursuit of external success, so rational, so applauded, leave so many women feeling fragmented, anxious, or numb? Because the cost of ignoring inner strength isn't loud. It's subtle, invisible, and deadly. The tyranny of the mask. In psychology, Carl Jung warned of the persona, the social mask we wear to fit in, succeed, or be accepted. For most, the persona is a necessary part of functioning in society. But for women, that mask often becomes a prison. A woman raised to perform, to be agreeable, attractive, competent, ambitious, selfless, but not too much of any one of those things, is not simply expressing herself. She is managing perception, constantly. Cognitive science calls this self-monitoring. High self-monitors are exquisitely aware of how they appear to others. They adjust behavior, tone, even body language to match the expectations of the room. The cost? Chronic self-alienation. Every moment spent curating the self is a moment lost living as the self. And the brain cannot sustain this fragmentation indefinitely. According to neuroscience, the prefrontal cortex, the region involved in executive function and self-control, exerts tremendous energy when managing self-presentation. Over time, this leads to mental fatigue, anxiety, and emotional detachment. But here's the deeper tragedy. The more successful she becomes, the more incentive there is to maintain the mask, because the world rewards her for it, even loves her for it. And so she tightens it, until her nervous system no longer knows the difference between authenticity and performance. The anxiety behind the smile. Beneath the surface, an ancient fear coils around her spine. If I stop striving, I will disappear. If I show my cracks, I will lose love. If I slow down, I will become irrelevant. This isn't personal neurosis, it's cultural inheritance. Women, for centuries, have been trained to believe that their value must be earned. Through beauty, through service, through perfection, through sacrifice. Modern success is simply the newest currency in that economy. You've replaced corsets with corner offices, but the tightness remains. Social psychology confirms this pattern. Women, more than men, report imposter syndrome at higher levels, despite equal or superior qualifications. This isn't because they are less capable. It's because the internalized belief persists: I am only as good as my output. Even when she's resting, she is calculating. Even in joy, she wonders if it's productive. Even in love, she asks if she is too much. And so she fragments, split between the woman she is and the one she thinks she must be to survive.
The soul becomes starved. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that when meaning is lost, suffering becomes unbearable. In the modern woman's life, meaning is often replaced by momentum. As long as she's moving, producing, climbing, she must be okay. But movement without meaning is spiritual erosion. Without an inner compass, she becomes a satellite, orbiting the expectations of others, of systems, of metrics she never chose. She doesn't know what nourishes her anymore, only what gets results. This, perhaps, is the most damning consequence of all: the loss of desire. Not sexual desire, not ambition, but soul desire. The deep, quiet longing for what is real, for what is whole, for what makes her feel alive, not just admired. This is what fades first. Then comes the numbness, the inexplicable sadness, the burnout that doesn't go away with sleep, the success that tastes increasingly like silence. And around her, the world keeps cheering, because the outside still looks perfect. The shadow of a silent epidemic. Statistically, women are now more likely than men to suffer from anxiety disorders, depression, and chronic fatigue. Rates of burnout are higher among high-performing women, especially in competitive, male-dominated environments. Yet few link this epidemic to the deeper hunger underneath. Instead, we medicate it, manage it, motivate our way through it. We tell women to work smarter, meditate more, schedule self-care. But the real problem isn't that she's doing too much. It's that she's doing too much of the wrong thing and calling it strength. True inner strength is not about capacity. It's about clarity. Clarity about who you are, what you want, and what you will no longer trade in order to feel worthy. And this clarity can't be gained through busyness. It must be reclaimed through reckoning. Because the longer she stays asleep to this hunger, the louder her life will scream. Not in words, in symptoms. Anxiety, disconnection, perfectionism, panic, resentment, restlessness, loneliness in the middle of applause. These are not personal failures. They are the soul's way of saying, this is not it. They are signs, invitations, alarms. And they lead to a single defining moment. Not a breakdown, a rebellion. The moment she stops asking, how can I be more? And starts asking, who was I before I thought I had to prove anything? The answer to that question doesn't live in books, titles, or accolades. It lives in the quiet center of her being, where no one claps, where no one watches, where the real work begins. And that is where we must go next. Into the fire, into the rebellion, into the radical act of remembering what it means to be whole.
The rebellion. How to break free. Imagine standing at the edge of a life you meticulously built. Degrees earned, goals achieved, boxes checked. Everything in place, everything right. But something primal stirs. A whisper, no louder than a breath. You are not home. Not home in your career, not home in your body, not home in your soul. And for the first time, the thought arises, not as a breakdown, but as a breakthrough. What if everything they told me about strength was wrong? The war isn't out there, it's in here. You've been fighting the wrong war. It was never really about the promotion, the perfect partner, the curated image of success. Those were proxies, disguises for a deeper hunger. Because the true battlefield is not your schedule, your salary, or your social standing. It is your perception of self, warped by centuries of conditioning, filtered through the lens of culture, and projected outward as ambition. You were told to build a life that would protect you, but no one told you that the armor eventually becomes a coffin. Rebellion, then, is not about running away from the world. It is about turning inward with a torch. It is not polite. It is not pretty. It is sacred violence against the lie that says you are only as valuable as your achievements. And the first act of rebellion? To pause. Stillness as revolution. Stillness terrifies the modern woman. Because in stillness there is no audience, no one to impress, no metrics to meet, just silence. And silence is where truth lives. That's why everything around you has been designed to keep you moving. Because stillness is dangerous. It reveals the contradictions, the emptiness beneath the shine. But to sit with yourself, undistracted, unperformed, is an act of defiance so radical that it threatens every identity you've worn like skin. Nietzsche once wrote, "No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." But make no mistake, there is a price. Stillness will dismantle you. It will unearth the buried rage, the grief of 1,000 moments you silenced your soul for the sake of approval, the longing for a life you never dared to ask for. And still you must stay.
Because on the other side of that silence is sovereignty. And with sovereignty comes something no one can give you: freedom. You do not need to be fixed. You need to be reclaimed. Modern self-help culture preys on inadequacy. You're told to optimize, improve, hustle, glow up, level up, as if your deepest power lies in being a more palatable version of yourself. But what if the answer is not more, but less? Less pretending, less pleasing, less polishing the mask. The rebellion is this: you don't need to become someone else. You need to return to the woman you were before the world told you who to be. That woman, wild, intuitive, unapologetically alive, still lives in your bones. She's the one who laughs too loud, who says no without explanation, who cries during sunsets, who feels everything and fears nothing. She is not gone, she is buried. And digging her out is not a 5-step plan. It's a homecoming.
Let go to let in. The process is brutal and beautiful. It begins with subtraction. What roles are you performing that are not yours? What dreams are inherited, not chosen? What definitions of strong have left you exhausted and hollow? Let them fall. Let them rot. Let them die. You cannot be reborn until you bury the woman you were never meant to be. And as you release, space emerges. Into that space flows what is true, not from outside, but from within. You begin to feel desire again. Not the desire to impress, but the desire to experience. Desire for depth, for poetry, for honest connection, for slow mornings and sacred boundaries, for wholeness that doesn't need to be witnessed to be real. This is not regression. It is resurrection. It is remembering that your life does not need to be validated to be valid. The ones who came before you. You are not the first to rebel. There are names written in fire who came before. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who taught women to reclaim their wild instinctual nature. Audre Lorde, who declared that caring for herself was not self-indulgence, but an act of political warfare. Anais Nin, who wrote, "And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom." Harriet Tubman, who said, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves." Every woman who chose truth over image, intuition over convention, is part of your lineage. Their rebellion lives in your blood. And now it's your turn. Action is alchemy. This is not an abstract awakening. It must be embodied. Start small, but start now. Say no without explanation. Rest when there is still work to do. Burn the to-do list and write a to-feel list. Ask, what do I want that has nothing to do with being liked? Cut off what drains you, even if it's familiar. Speak even when your voice trembles. Let the discomfort sharpen you, not shrink you. Each act of alignment rewires your nervous system. Each moment of truth-telling builds a bridge back to self. Each decision to feel instead of perform is an act of spiritual war. This is not the end. It's the exit. The rebellion will cost you things. Comfort, control, maybe even relationships. But what you gain is yourself. And in that reclamation, you realize something devastatingly beautiful. You were never broken. You were buried. Now the soil cracks.
The light enters. You rise, not as an improved version of what the world wanted you to be, but as a woman who no longer asks permission to exist. And as you rise, you feel it, not just in your mind, but in your body. You don't crave the pedestal, you crave the ground, the rootedness, the truth, the strength that cannot be seen, but can never be taken. This is the rebellion. This is the return. This is the becoming. And still, one final question waits. Not, what do you want to achieve? But, what do you now know that no one can unteach you?
The ultimate truth. The deepest realization. Imagine walking through your life, not as a performer, a striver, or even a survivor, but as a woman who finally stopped needing proof. Not proof of her worth, her beauty, her intelligence, her resilience. Just being, undeniable, unshakable, enough. But before you reached that knowing, there was one final illusion you had to burn. Not the illusion of success, not the illusion of strength, but the deepest illusion of all. That inner strength is something you must earn. It's not. It is something you remember. What if you were never meant to win the outer game? Here's the final paradox. Everything you thought you were supposed to win, the applause, the recognition, the perfect resume, the tightly held composure, was never the real game. It was a decoy. The outer game is rigged, endlessly shifting, seductively packaged as empowerment, but built to keep you spiraling, comparing, consuming, and performing. It keeps you on the hamster wheel, chasing external metrics of success that have nothing to do with your actual fulfillment. And here's the unspeakable truth. You were never meant to master that game, because the moment you win it, you lose yourself. So what if your constant friction, your internal resistance, your silent question, is this all there is, wasn't a weakness? What if it was a compass? A refusal to be pacified by a life too small for your soul. You didn't fail the system. You were never designed to belong to it. And the moment you see that, not intellectually, but viscerally, the walls crack. And what pours in is not panic, but clarity. The truth beneath the ache. There's an ache many women carry. It's not depression, not anxiety, not burnout. It's a homesickness for a self they haven't met yet, but feel in their marrow. You feel her sometimes in dreams, in quiet moments between breaths, in memories that aren't yours, but live in your lineage. This ache doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're waking up. It's the ache of potential unclaimed, of power not expressed, of softness suppressed so long it calcified into armor. And here's the radical truth. That ache is your guide. Not something to fix or numb or overcome, but a sacred signal. It points you back, not to the self you project, but to the self you are. And that self, she doesn't chase success. She embodies strength. She walks into a room without needing to prove a damn thing. She doesn't seek the spotlight, but the root. She doesn't need admiration. She needs truth. Because she knows that outer success can impress, but only inner strength can liberate. The myth of having it all. You've been sold the myth of having it all. Career, love, beauty, balance, motherhood, independence, emotional intelligence, sexual confidence, ambition, softness, six-figure income, toned abs, healed trauma, Pinterest-worthy home, flawless skin, social activism, spiritual alignment, glowing skin, mental health days, and a side business. All at once.
with grace, without complaint. But this myth was never about wholeness. It was about exhaustion disguised as empowerment. The real truth? You don't need to have it all. You need to feel it all. Own it all. Hold your joy and your rage, your wildness and your tenderness, your craving to be seen and your right to disappear. Wholeness isn't perfection. It's permission to be everything you are, without apology, without performance, without splitting yourself into parts just to be palatable. The sacred reclamation. What women crave, truly, is not power in the way the world defines it. Not domination, not hierarchy, not more visibility or validation. What they crave is rootedness. To belong to themselves. To not be exiled from their own hearts in the pursuit of being enough. They crave a kind of inner strength that cannot be taken by layoffs, breakups, judgment, or age. The strength of knowing. I am not for sale. I am not a product. I am not a project. I am a presence. And when a woman embodies that knowing, the world around her begins to recalibrate. She no longer chases. She attracts. She doesn't audition for connection. She becomes a mirror that reflects the truth in others. She stops asking, "Am I too much?" and starts asking, "Is this enough for me?" This is not confidence. This is sovereignty.
The deepest realization. Now, take a breath. Feel your heartbeat. Close your eyes, if only for a moment. Ask yourself, with no audience watching, who am I when there is nothing left to prove? That is the question the world taught you never to ask, because the answer would set you free. And when you find it, here's what you'll realize. Inner strength is not loud. It is silent and immovable. It does not shimmer. It glows. It does not seek conquest. It seeks congruence. It does not scream for attention. It listens for alignment. It does not inflate. It roots. Deep. Unshakable. And maybe, just maybe, what you were really craving all along wasn't to be extraordinary in the world's eyes, but to finally feel at home in your own. The woman who returns. So here you are, not at the end, but at the beginning. Not having arrived, but having returned. Returned to your rhythm, to your truth, to the knowing that cannot be taught, only remembered. You are no longer trying to make it. You are making meaning, making space, making peace with your own complexity. This is what inner strength looks like. Choosing solitude over shallow company. Saying no when it disappoints. Crying in public without shame. Leaving the room when your intuition whispers. Creating without asking for applause. Loving without performing worthiness. And most of all, staying loyal to yourself, even when the world demands your betrayal. One final question. What if the strongest thing you could do was to stop trying to be strong for others? What if the greatest success was being able to hear your own voice again, clearly, unapologetically, intimately? What if everything you've been chasing was already inside you, waiting for the noise to quiet? What if your softness was never weakness, but the strongest language your soul speaks? And what if you were never meant to rise like a skyscraper, rigid and imposing, but to unfold, like a forest, vast, alive, untamed, and endlessly rooted in something deeper than the eye can see?
This is not the end of your story. This is the truth buried beneath every performance, every chase, every mask. You were never meant to be admired. You were meant to be whole.